as required basis, especially after spills. So which equipment need decontamination? Every equipment requires decontamination. Your fridges, your centrifuges, pipettes, biosafety cabinets, all laboratory equipment requires decontamination processes. And apart from equipment, you also need to clean other areas. We are talking about equipment here, but we also need to be aware that decontamination processes involves lab benchtops, sample collection areas, effluents, contaminated solid waste, etc. So decontamination practices should be part of your laboratory safety protocol, not just in equipment but also in other areas. From decontamination, we move on to biomedical waste disposal. Most equipment will generate liquid, both reagent waste, byproducts, waste from laboratory, from the samples. All these will become part of your equipment effluent. Effluent is a major concern for laboratories. When placing an equipment in the laboratory, it should be made sure how to consider liquid waste will be handled. To be aware of this and comply with local and national requirements for liquid waste disposal in order to prevent contamination of the community sewage systems with pathogens and toxic chemicals. So that's the next step. Effluent management of liquid effluents is also a very important thing that we have to think through while we are operating our equipment in the lab. Now that we have talked about few aspects of equipment safety, there are other aspects that we have not included in this discussion, but you can read more about it in the equipment management module and in the facility safety and management modules, which are also on this website. All these will include ultraviolet safety, laser safety, glassware safety. These are all considerations of equipment safety, and this also should be thoroughly understood. Please read those modules which are available on this website. So we are done with now maintenance. So we have come to the next concept, which is indirectly part of your maintenance, but also a totally different aspect of it, which is backup equipment or backup referral labs in the case of breakdown. In certain circumstances, example, an analyzer repair or breakdown, lack of available consumables, lack of required reagents, control materials, continued failure in EQUAS, etc., a laboratory may need to use backup equipment or backup laboratory for testing and reporting. The lab must develop a policy for use of backup instruments or laboratories in case of failure of testing equipment for all analytes being tested in the laboratory. So you should have a backup plan. There can be breakdowns, so what is your backup plan? To ensure that the quality of the result or data produced using the backup equipment, the primary laboratory must be able to demonstrate acceptable testing proficiency and comparability between the primary and the backup equipment or the backup laboratories for such relevant analytes using tools such as laboratory audit reports, EQUA history, instrument validation, reference ranges, etc. So what does that mean? What do you mean by comparability between two equipment or two laboratories? Let me just explain this so that it become actually a practical thing rather than a theory thing. If two laboratories have different reference ranges because they are using, you assume that two laboratories have the reference ranges because they are using two different methods for testing an analyte, and the comparability can be compromised. And the patient and the clinicians may get confused with the results. Let's say one lab has a reference range for an analyte between 100 and 120, whatever units, and another lab has a reference range, which is a normal range again, between 120 and 140. and you are getting a report of 125, which is normal in the case of the latter lab but is high in the case of the former lab. Such reports are confusing, and therefore comparability should be checked out before deciding upon outsourcing of the test or doing the test on a backup equipment. This is an important concept that has to be kept in mind. So, even if you have more than one equipment in the laboratory which is routinely used, not even as a backup, but also you have two equipment and you're doing it alternatively, so there is no continuity for a patient who's coming. If the reporting ranges are different, you have to be mindful of that. This has to be borne in mind that methods can be different, and therefore biological reference ranges can be different, and these can create confusion for the clinicians and the patients. So comparability is a very important concept when you are thinking about any kind of equipment backup or even using two different equipment in a laboratory. Having said that, it's extremely vital thing that backup options are available either as equipment or as outsourced laboratories, which can be availed if there is an equipment breakdown, any other reason why test cannot be undertaken after a patient sample has been accepted. So that is about having an equipment backup. You need to have an option, and that option should be the right option. The results should be comparable. You should also make sure that the backup equipment or the backup laboratory are doing well if quality wise and their results are comparable to yours, so that the patient and the clinician are not confused by your not doing the test on your routine equipment. So now that we talked about equipment backup, the next concept that we have to talk about is your power backup. All of us in India are frequently confronted with power outages. So critical equipment must be supported with uninterrupted power supply, or what we call UPS systems, to prevent damage to the equipment and to ensure continuity of the services. Selection of a proper size and type of UPS is very important based on the lab's power source and voltage regulation. Size of UPS will depend upon the amount of power drawn by each subsystem and the battery backup time required. Two important considerations: the amount of power drawn by each system, each equipment, air conditioners, whichever you are using, and the battery backup time required. Ideal is an online UPS system. You have to read more about online UPS systems to understand the concepts well. But in short, this is a system which is hooked on to your online systems, and because the power is coming through this online system, even when there's a sudden power outage, you don't need to switch on anything because it's an automatic thing, and your entire laboratory will continue to function for a certain amount of time depending upon the hours of backup which is available. Generally, the medium sized UPS, online UPS systems will give you 4 hours or at least 2 hours of backup depending upon how much equipment or how much of electricity will be required for your lab for that period of time. And if you have an online UPS system, it will regulate the output voltage and has a smooth transition from mains to battery during an outage. This is something that every lab must give consideration to on having an online UPS system. It's also important to have laid down protocols for regular checks and maintenance of batteries of the UPS and change them based upon the backup support time. If you have an online UPS system or any kind of UPS system, it's not just enough to have it, but also The same kind of maintenance plan should be available for the UPS. Entire thing should be documented. Like any other equipment, UPS also deserves the same kind of treatment as in your equipment management. And if the online UPS system is connected to a local power generator, especially if it has an automatic changeover system, this will ensure that your operations will not get interrupted till your supply is resumed. Such a backup system will ensure smooth equipment operation if there is prolonged power outages. This also may be a requirement in case of some of the labs, especially in remote areas with a lot of power outages. Please understand more on this through your electrical support unit in your laboratory, in your hospital, and this is something that you may want to discuss with your administration also. To have two kinds of electrical backup that we are talking about. One is a UPS, preferably an online system, and also a generator which is connected to the UPS so that the electricity will continue as far as possible and your services will not be interrupted. So after electricity, there's another utility very important in the laboratory, that is your analysis water. Many analyte testing, the water quality needs to be maintained. Generally, it is type 2 water which is required. Monitoring of water quality in terms of conductivity, resistivity, pH and TDS or total dissolved solids are required to maintain quality of reports for many biochemical analytes. For more on this, you may please refer to the Equipment Management module of Labs for Life. In this video, we talked about the maintenance plan. Basically, we are now in the using an equipment, under which initially in the earlier video we talked about calibration. In this video, we talked about the maintenance plan. We talked about making a maintenance plan and implementing a plan and documenting that plan. And when we talked about, then we talked about safety. We talked about certain aspects of safety, electrical safety, physical safety, and biosafety. And then we moved on to the concept of having backup equipment. Backup equipment is required in case of equipment breakdown. How do you have the continuity of services? Therefore, you need a backup equipment. And later on, we talked about power backup, which is again something to ensure continuity of services. If there is a power outage, how do you carry on your work? So that is your power backup. And we finally talked about water quality as an important part of the utilities that you need in your laboratory. These are all concepts which are included in the equipment management, though they are smaller concepts. These are very vital concepts and should be paid enough attention to ensure for the smooth operation of your equipment.